And that makes it Lancaster Woodturners Coffee Hour number 224, I think. October 17th, 2024. Good morning, all y'all. I see 32 on screen right now. We usually get around 40 by the time people keep on dinging in. I like to keep, I know a lot of you guys, people in person, so I like to keep track of the names. So, but I got a screen view that I'm using now that's showing up. The reason I'm saying that is I know I'm way behind in editing videos and posting them. I'm not actually way behind in editing them. I'm way behind in posting. And some of that's computer issues and some of that's I've just been busy with other things. But I'm cruising towards a mega dump of about 10 videos. And that'll get me caught up to date. And all the blurbs will all be there and they'll be searchable on YouTube so far as that's possible. So that's my story and I'm sticking to it. Next Lancaster Club event is election night. After considering meeting Monday or Wednesday or not at all, the dudes decided to go ahead on election night. And I think probably that was a good decision. It'll distract us. They won't have any poll returns before the meeting is over anyway. Although I doubt if Barry will be there since he's a poll judge. Let me see. Anything else? If I'm going to continue my current practice of updating you for a moment on my own work before I go to the heads up. But even before that, let's clear any more announcements. Randy, what's up with Susquehanna? Ken Vasco, what's up at Nittany and all that stuff?
Well, with Susquehanna, of course, the Turn for the Troops event is coming up at the Woodcraft in Harrisburg. And I am furiously making pen blanks.
Oh, I bet you are.
I don't know how many are in there, and I don't know how many are in here. But I am doing that furiously, and I have a tip for anyone. You have to scuff your pen blanks to make the glue stick to them, because the brass tubes, because the brass tubes are extruded and they use an oil on the tubes to keep them from sticking to the dies. So you must scuff the tubes. Some tubes come pre-scuffed, some do not. These don't. So what I did was, this is just a piece of 1/4" 20 threaded rod, and I take the, if I can get it, and I take the tube and I put it on there. Now I'm going to reposition this, so try not to get sick. Can you see that now?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a small disc sander in there, and this is how I scuff the tubes. Turn the lathe on. It's running about 1200 RPM. And there's a perfectly scuffed tube.
I'd like to see a little more of that setup there, Randy. Can you move your camera just a little bit?
Sure.
So that we can see it. I'm liking the, yeah. Well, yeah. So your dust hose is permanent there, coming in the back, and that box is on there all the time, I bet.
Whenever I'm making pens, yes.
Yeah, and you mostly make
And that connects up to my, I'll turn that on. That connects up to my dust collector. And right here, I have a remote control for it, and I can turn it on and off.
Does that thing I'm seeing in the back flip? Oh, yeah. Show us that. Good.
The back flips up so that I really, when I'm making pens, I do not have to wear a face shield.
Yeah. And
because
what's that?
This will catch anything.
What's the tool rest?
It's one I got from a gentleman on IAP, on the International Pen Turners Group. His name is Rick Harrell, and he makes these. He does not have a store. He does not do advertising. He makes these as kind of a service to the pen turners. and it's modular. So you can get pen blanks like the bars like this, bars like this. He will make them up to 12 inches long.
I
And they
wonder.
are hardened steel, so they do not scratch.
I wonder if that's the same fellow that Bowman was talking about, and Bowman's got a tool rest to show as well. So
There is a company called Southern Tools or something Southern
that's the ones. They were
that also
Mid-Atlantic. They were
makes
terrific.
something similar.
Yeah. Well, I got you on here. How many lathes is Woodcraft going to have for that turn for the troops event?
Somewhere between 5 or 6.
And are those like study lathes that they keep, or do they then sell them as lightly used lathes, or what?
They are well used.
So they're club lathes or they're study lathes that they keep there all the time.
Yes, yes. These are the lathes they use for their classes.
Okay, got it. Yeah, and they do a lot of pen turning classes there.
Yes, they do.
Is that true of Woodcraft or Rockler stores where other people live? I mean, he's talking about Harrisburg, PA.
Yes, that is the term for the troops event is company wide. Although each store determines how they're going to celebrate the event.
Right, and how much they're going to put into it and how they're going to promote it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they'll have about 6 lathes set up
yeah.
probably for that event, 9th and 10th.
Okay.
It's Saturday and Sunday.
Okay, well, from that little look at tool rest, Bowman, do you want to show us that tool rest that you were showing me a little while ago?
Sure. Let me turn off my
Yeah,
background
turn your
again.
background off.
Anyways, I'll hold it in front of me. I have the pictures to show you. Uh, this is a standard 6-inch.
Wait, when you get it back in front of your face,
Yeah,
there.
there you
Now
go.
stop waving it around. Hold still.
This is a standard, what you call, I guess, a box rest. It's a flat one, about 6 inches long. But I had a recent, and let me go to the picture. I had a recent a bowl that I wanted to take another 1/4 inch off the bottom, and it was finished, and I did not want to run the risk messing it up. I tell you, I did an update last night, and boy, they really screw you up. They make changes like you need to. Are you guys seeing this now?
Yeah, we got a lot of furniture around it that you could do. You give
There
us
you
a,
go.
there you
There you
go.
go.
Yeah, that's what we want. Good, good, good.
That's what I wanted to show you. Um, and what I did to make that was I looked, and nobody makes a rest that does an angle like that. I haven't found it. I went looking and going, I'll buy one of these if I can find it. So I went right looking in my scrap pile. I don't know how many of you guys in the early days bought one of those aluminum vices that you clamp on your bench. You have a little thread on the bottom, and then it's two aluminum jaws. And I said, all right. So I took it all apart, cut the stud off over here, and drilled down through and put a carriage bolt, which is below the surface, and bolted it below. And then to keep it from rotating back and right, I stuck a CA glue in to hold it rigid. And I tell you, it works like a charm. I had it like a 1/4 inch away. I had my big old negative rake scraper, and I just nicely went across there. And I was only grabbing this bowl anymore by less than about an eighth or less with the chuck jaws.
Well, you're
And
doing
I did it.
finishing. You're doing finishing cuts in there, like little light cuts. You're not hogging
That's
because you can't
that's
tilt the tool. That forces the flat tool.
that's right. And I've had enough experience with having catches inside. Maybe it's me and I need to practice, practice, practice. But I have my big old negative rake, and it slid nicely across, and I took a 1/4 inch off and without rattling up my finished bowl because it's going to a friend. So
What are you turning there while we're talking to you?
uh, this this bowl,
What's
is
the
that
wood?
what you're asking? Yeah,
What wood is that?
It is actually, I'm calling it aged persimmon. A year and a half ago, a friend gave me, I swear, a chunk of his persimmon tree that his father-in-law took down next to their homestead on the farm. And he gave me a chunk that was, I'll bet 24 inches across by 3 or 4 feet. I just rolled in my driveway outside my shop, and I finally got to cutting it up because I wanted to make these big bowls for his friend. Well, the darn stuff had aged in a way that disappointed me because I turned a whole mess of green stuff from persimmon and loved it. This was almost at the dozy point, but it actually got some, let me see if I can show you. It actually got some, I don't have it on here. This one came right here, came from the same log. This one actually showed some spalting, which I did not have in the stuff I turned a year and a half ago. So I made, this is a deeper one. So
So let's
I
go back
was,
to that tool rest then. If we could see that tool rest, put that tool rest back. I'd like to hear from other people on these kind of flat tool rests. Do you use them? Where do you get them? How do you like them?
right, I
Yeah,
got you
like that.
right there. Yeah, that would be an interesting conversation because getting inside of bowls, I one of the famous turners, and I'm not sure if it was Ellsworth who said he doesn't ever use curved, curved what we call bowl to get you inside the bowl. And I understand why you'd say that because as you're going around the corner, it changes the perspective of how your uh, tool rests on the rest. So I don't know. This one I knew I couldn't risk having the angle change at all while I'm going around. Plus, I couldn't get back in there with that kind of tool rest. I have
Are
two
you
or three of them.
are we talking about a regular scraper and you're like right on center or just below center or what are we talking about in there?
I'm dead on center with an inch and a half flat scraper that I ground to a negative rake, 25 degrees on the top, on either side, actually. And boy, I learned from you guys the value of getting over to the grinder every now and then because, boy, the sharper you keep that, the nicer it cuts that burr. So
Do you take the burr straight from the grinder or do you burnish the burr?
I do not burnish it, straight from the grinder.
I
Yeah,
attended,
after a while it becomes too fiddly for me.
I attended the Alan Lacer workshop on that, and I until he passed around a scraper that he had just raised the burr on, I had not understood how fine a burr he's talking about, and so I've been experimenting with that and finding that a stoning the burr off from the scraper from the grinder and then putting it on again with a burnisher, very effective. But for me, on wee little box tools, on what you're talking about, an inch and a half big scraper, I don't know, maybe different.
Yeah. Um, yeah, let me kill this. We've seen that
Yeah.
enough.
Anybody
Yeah,
else on anybody else
Tom,
about these big flat tool rests? You're all very quiet.
Yeah, I'd like to say I don't like it. It looks too bulky, and I think it would get more in the way of anything, and you're limited to how small you can go. I use my robust J rest, and it's far more successful as far as I'm concerned.
For what you do,
Yep.
yeah, which is a lot like what Bowman does, as it happens.
Yeah. But I love that J rest. It's so versatile in it. And I don't think I've come up against anything yet that I haven't been able to get it in.
I've made a couple of small flat rests for mine, but I use a larger cross section. I use a 1 inch square steel because if you go out 3 or 4 inches, anything less than that seems to vibrate.
Yeah.
And so the base thing would be if you like yours looks like it's pretty thin where it's coming out of the tool post with the other piece added on. Probably works really good for really fine cuts, but I get a little aggressive. So I made mine out of 1 inch square bar stock and I just drilled and tapped it and put it into a post. And that got rid of some of the vibration, but it works for me. That's all.
Is that tool rest attached only by that carriage bolt?
that's the mechanical torquing on it. I ground and sanded everything clean on the aluminum and the steel and put thick CA glue in when I drew it down, because I didn't want it to switch side to side, like. But boy, I drew down tight on that 5/16 inch carriage bolt that holds that, and that's also epoxied into the aluminum. So
What is that forward feature? It looks like about a 3/8 diameter bore. What is that for?
this came from one of those clamp on the bench tool rests, cheapo ones.
Hold it up so we can see what you're talking about.
It's a
And-
vice jaw.
Oh,
And that was the bar that slides through. There was the thing you crank.
That was a vice.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it has no function in this wrist.
No, it doesn't. And I wasn't going to drill a big enough hole in my box rest. I figured that's going to take some of the strength away from the tip, and it didn't need to be that big. The hole down here was actually the one that had the metal slider in, that it slid on. The top one had the crank one in, and this one was smaller, so I drilled through there. So.
Do you use a box rest like a flat rest like that, Barry? Barry Price?
Huh.
Barry.
Good question.
You're muted. I'm sorry. Barry, you're still muted. I'm asking you, Barry, whether you use one of those flat rests.
I do use one, but not for what it was meant for. I mean, yeah, for inside a box, but I also made just a routing platform that allows me to put my router right at the spindle center height for doing decorative work on the outside.
Yeah, the one I have I used for my drilling rig, so I can drill on center on the tool rest. It works pretty well for that. And then I bought another little one that I haven't even used yet. I mean, I look at it and I don't use it. I go inside my little boxes with just on a regular tool rest.
Just to be clear, I would not hog out a bowl. I consider this box rest a finishing rest. That's the only way I've ever used them. Even when I'm in a smaller box or something, I just slide it and work on it.
Yeah,
but I needed something to help me finish off the bottom without wrecking the bowl. So
yeah, well, I get that, and I think it's effective. That's why I'm polling others, looking for more lore on these things. We have never talked about these that I can recall.
I know they have bottom feeder chisels. I tell you, I try it, and every time it scares the you know what out of me. So
Stuart Batty, does a lot of scraping with negative rake scrapers, and as I recall, his guidance is you only need about a 3-to-1 leverage on a negative rake scraper because it is so non-aggressive and safe. So I guess I'm not sure why you're getting such massive catches, Jim, that require you to have that tool rest, because the overhang with almost any kind of handle you'd have would easily give you a 3-to-1 ratio for, say, going 3 inches deep. I guess I've never seen a need to have that kind of support for a very fine touch finishing cut with a negative rake scraper.
I find that I've tried using going into the bottom of a bowl, and I find that the problem I have is because at the bottom corner that Jim is referring to, you're reaching out, so the tool is no longer against your body, the scraper is no longer against your body, and so for me it becomes extremely difficult to hold that tool stable, and any tiny catch at all just flicks all over the place. So I struggle to keep my tool steady when my arms are stretched out like that, and that's where I find that type of rest is actually, if anything, beneficial. I bought one recently. I haven't really tried it too much, but that was the purpose behind it.
your lathe may be too big for this, Doug, but on my lathe, which is a 14-inch lathe, I bring up the the tailstock, and rest my elbow on the tailstock. So
Yeah,
it's part of the arm. So my arm is supported from the elbow at the tailstock.
okay. I never thought of doing that, John, to be honest.
That's a great idea. I have the same issue. When you're what I call chicken winged out over the ways, you're just waiting for it to catch and throw the chisel around. So I'm gonna roll my tailstock up. That's a good idea.
Yeah. It's actually, for me, when I'm doing that scraping, it's not the actual cut that causes the damage. It's the handle going flying into the edge of the bowl that it makes me more nervous at the top, and then
side of my head is what causes me.
Well, I actually ground the left corner even into more of a radius. Mine was a normal radius on a round nose scraper. I actually ground it more because I had to keep watching with my left eye watching as I came across it. I didn't catch there because then I'd have another catch. So I grounded back and didn't sneak into the corner very much. So.
Well, one of the things I've done in that regard, and following Mike Peace's advice, is I bought some bars of tool steel just off Amazon, cheap Chinese-made tool steel, and I put them in handles and grind them as I need them. So I have a scraper with a safe edge. So the working edge is a negative rake scraper for finishing the bottom of my little boxes. But the edge that would contact the wall of the box on that particular scraper, it comes almost to an edge, but then it's rounded over. So it doesn't do any cutting. So it doesn't dig in over there. There's no corner over there. It's not involved. And that eliminated a lot of catches.
I have one of those. Yeah.
I see Richard Raffin and his mentee Tomislav, when they're sharpening their scrapers, with Richard obviously it's not a negative rake, but it's conventional, but when they rotate it across the tool rest, then they start lifting up the tool up the wheel, so the bevel on the left-hand side is very steep, not acute. So it might be, 60 or 70 degrees in front. Almost, it merges into almost 90 at the side, John, for the same reason you're saying. So it won't grab or catch on the side when you're bringing it around.
Yeah, I think
that's a great idea, because I didn't like that. It forms a little V-like when you round that off, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to rock it up as I bring it around, lift it off of the 25 degrees. And
watch one of his sharpening videos on sharpening scrapers.
Before I caught on to your bandwidth is not very good today, Mike. We don't have a picture anymore, and your audio is not so good. So something's up with your setup. We see you now.
Yeah, somehow the video got unclicked, so the sound is not good, huh?
Echoey.
Okay.
Mine probably is too. I'm using a mic way over here. Here it comes.
Yeah, I was going to mention that, John, but we were hearing you okay.
Yeah, well, I brought my mic over now. It's much closer to me. Yeah.
Yep.
When I was buying store-bought scrapers, they're precious, right? I don't want to mess it up, so I keep the standard shape or try and sharpen it better and just that. But now that I can make them all at any time, and I have almost zero money invested in them, I can make them. I can have lots. I can have one that's dead square with sharp corners, and one with the corners dubbed off, and one that's a little gentle curve. And that has really freed me up for the ditzy little things I'm making. It's really helped a lot.
Well, after watching Richard Raffin's videos very carefully for the last 2 years, I've probably doubled the number of scrapers I have. I do a lot more scraping, and like you, John, you start thinking more about special purpose scrapers with profiles for tasks that you do a lot, and one size does not fit all.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly.
I had the wrong microphone clicked on. Sounds better now, doesn't it?
Yeah, I was in the same spot. My mic was on, but it was way over there.
Go ahead.
John, you mentioned about getting just cheapo steel off the internet. Have you gone to like a flea market and picked up old chisels or files and used those for scrapers?
Yeah, I used to do that all the time, but these bars of Chinese tool steel are better. They come in millimeter sizes for one thing. They're nice and clean.
And high-speed steel, that's the main thing.
Yeah, high-speed steel. They didn't have high-speed
Not
steel.
carbon tool steel from a chisel that's not going to hold a burr worth a squat.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking more of a file as opposed to a chisel, but anyway, yeah, okay, I hear you.
Well, files are inherently dangerous to make scrapers unless you're very careful on the overhang, which a lot of people aren't. They're going to overhang it like any other scraper, and it might hang off the tool rest a couple of inches. And if you do that, those little micro fractures from that file manufacturer, that's an accident waiting to happen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ernie, I think last week or the other week suggested if you use files, you gotta heat treat them, heat them red hot, and let them cool down, and it takes out that rigidity.
So send $12 off and get 4 bars of high-speed steel.
Or buy Benjamin's Best with the handles on them already for the same price almost, and then regrind them to suit.
Yes.
If you use a file, you must anneal it. Otherwise, they're dangerous because they can split, and if they split, you've no idea where it's going to go.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Can I ask, when you make these tools, how long you make the tang?
I'm buying bars of tool steel that are 8 inches long, so I'll probably have 3 inches in the handle.
But if you look at the typical tang on almost any tool, they're rarely over 2 inches long, and unless you're talking about maybe a 5/8 bowl gouge might be 2.5. But those tangs aren't all that long.
I might have 2 inches in the handle, 2 to 3 inches.
Yeah.
But I make the handle I make the handle to the bar, and I glue them in with epoxy. So I make a 3-layer handle. So it's in there good. It's not a square peg in a round hole.
And when you buy those bars, they're almost always 200 millimeters. So you're looking at an 8-inch bar. So you got lots of steel, even if you use 3-inch tang.
Yeah.
Aren't you guys also using something on the outside of around the wood as well? I forget what you call it.
Ferrule.
I use copper connectors or.
No, I don't on little finishing scrapers. I don't. There's no need for it.
Oh.
If I was making heavier duty tools, I would absolutely. Yeah. And I use copper when I make handles, copper ferrules, because it's easy to work, and you can buy. There's usually a chunk of it around the basement someplace.
Yep.
Yeah.
Looks pretty too.
I'd like to give my weekly progress report on my project right now, if I can. And to do that, I am going to spotlight myself just if I can for a second. I don't know how to do that anymore.
Do you want me to do it?
Yeah, and then I have to kill the background, so I'm going to take a second here. So when we left off, this was the last box I showed you all. Let me just figure out why I can't get it to the center of the screen. There it is. Okay. And this is about 3 1/4 in diameter and about 3/4 thick. And you can see the profile there. If I hold it right. Yeah. And it's smooth all around. It has a little seam there and a bead there, and it opens like that. So I'm quite happy with that. And the magnet holds good, and it's looking good on the outside. This is English walnut. It's nice and clean on the inside. It's about 1/4 inch thick in the lid and the base, so I could make them thinner and get a more slender box. So I went to do that, and I made a littler one. This is about 2 7/8, and the difference in size that 3/8 in diameter makes is astonishing to me. But anyway, and this is also thinner by and it's probably 5/8 thick. This is it's probably 5/8, and it's the same interior. These are all 4 magnet boxes, And so I was quite happy with that. I figured, okay, that's a design I can replicate. That's a successful design. I have scope to decorate the bottom if I want to, although I really kind of do like the smooth all over effect. And I really do like framing whatever the lid is with the side. I can inlay into that, and that's just a natural feature of the process anyway, because in order to hide the magnets in the lid, I'm making a wood sleeve. And it turns out that that's the first thing I do with the blank, once I get it to a cylinder, is make that wood sleeve, and then proceed to make the box in the usual way, and then glue the sleeve on after I've installed the magnets. So doing it that way has turned out to be a pretty successful way of producing, or not producing, you can't produce these things. So then I made this one, and to me, interestingly enough, the curve of the side is the inverse. How can I show it? Well, one's an innie, the other's an outie, but it's the same curve. And this is from spalted tamarind that I got at the Mid-Atlantic. I was looking at these things on my photographic, I was photographing them, and I said, oh man, I made about a dozen of these without blowing one up, and I was feeling kind of, proud of myself, ho, ho, ho. Next day, I blew this one up, I blew the bottom up, I got a cut a catch and it flew off the lathe. So I inlaid, or rather made a ring of tamarind to put around the tamarind bottom, and it looks fine, you'd never know it. The glue line is inside the bead. And nobody ever looks at this anyway. You can see it very prominently here, but it's not a thing it doesn't become a feature. It's not really noticeable. So and again, the magnets are hidden behind this. And here I got a little tight with my tolerances. I could probably take another shaving off, and I probably got a little bit of room in here. And this technique is giving me the delicacy that I'm looking for in these things. These are not clunky, and they work. They stay closed, and so I'm feeling I have two successful designs here that offer me scope for additional decoration now in form of inlay and rings and beads and stuff like that. And I think this making of this sleeve it turned out to be a pretty good idea. So there. Let me change the view. Take the spotlight off if you would, so I can go back to multi-speaker. Yeah. And back to
John, are the inner walls straight or are they tapered?
Straight. I try for straight, and I learned a lot about that. I've been measuring carefully. My method of using a ruler and sighting against the latheways is not as accurate as a caliper, so I've been teaching myself or relearning how to use a caliper. The only if you match the taper, then there's a place where the taper will fit, but then it's a gluing nightmare to get it working. I've been having a lot of trouble with that. They've got to be dead straight, and then you can get a fit. Hard to get a fit any other way. Anybody else? I was thinking about how many of these I've made in the last couple of years. It must be 50 or 60. I give them away and I don't keep track. But I'm feeling I've finally gotten to something that's getting close to where I'm trying to go.
Are you going to try?
Did you count how many M&Ms you can get in? That's a significant question for the Lancaster Club.
I forgot about that. That was a good question.
Are you going to write an article for the AAW Journal or something, John, on that?
I fantasize about doing that, but I find I don't have the attention span to write articles anymore. I can get through editing a video, but I don't.
Well, in that case, have you put together a video on just this subject from woe to go to say how to put one together from with the critical things you've learned?
I'm sneaking up on that. I've got a lot of video. I have a lot of unedited video, and these segments I'm doing here, these little couple quickie check-ins every week, has made a kind of a diary of this whole project, and that's made it a lot of fun for me too. I can gather those segments up and edit that into a tight little video.
I think it would be worth it just because you've spent a lot of effort on it. Now being able to find it in one place as opposed to doing it would be useful to the rest of us.
When I get the rest of these the sleeve techniques involved in pulling off this lid, When I perfect getting that right, when I'm real close to it, I'll shoot some video and string it together. Yeah, I got something going on there that I haven't seen anybody else do. It's very woodturnerly, you know. You come in with a parting tool from the end, uh, like the old guys would. Okay, thank you very much, David Hudgel. You've had your hand up there. What would you like to show us today?
I'd like to show you a couple bowls.
Right.
Multi-axis turning is spindle oriented. And after Barbara Dill taught me about how to do spindle off multi-axis turning, I wanted to take that concept to bowls. Here is a 7.5 inch diameter bowl with that I oriented at 120 degrees and put points off center on both the bottom and the top, 1 inch from the center. And then I turned it with a parallel so that it was 1 to 1, 2 to 2, and 3 to 3. And when you do that, you get this straight separation between the sides.
Way cool. Very good.
Now, this one is 11.5 inches, and I did this with the same kind of setup, but I turned it 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and 3 to 1. And that way it gives you an angled separation between the sides, like this. Here. And I've been wanting to do this for a long time. And Barbara Dill warned me about the safety of such turning. But I found if I use a drive center like this with a point into the hole where off center 1 inch, it holds it very well. That goes up to put it up into here. And then the live center, I use a big pointed live center. And the other trick I learned from Derek Wiedemann is that I put a piece of wood on the bed lathe behind the tailstock to hold the tailstock from slipping backwards when you tighten the tailstock against your piece. So that's worked very well, and I love doing this kind of turning, so it's really been fun.
Wait a minute now. What's that? What are you trying to do with the piece of wood behind the tailstock? Is it a safety precaution?
Oftentimes, when you tighten up the tailstock against the wood, it pushes the tailstock backwards a bit. So if you put a piece of wood behind the tailstock and anchor it to the bedways with clamps, then the tailstock will not move backwards when you tighten the tailstock, when you tighten into the wood.
All right. Any comments for David? Questions? Those are great.
Yeah. What diameter do you put on your 1, 2, 3 points? Is it 1 inch off of the center?
Yes, 1 inch off of center.
David, do you bore the or turn the inside before you turn the outside?
No, I turn the outside first, and then I put them on center to do the inside.
How do you manage the weight? I mean, the eccentric load trying to make your lathe rock. I've done just much less mass than that, and I have to counterbalance it.
Yes, sometimes you do have to do that. I haven't had that be a problem with these. There's enough balance with it as it is. And of course, and with multi-axis turning, you want to go fairly fast because you're turning a lot of air. Obviously, you've got to be careful with anything that's weighted off center that you don't go too fast. And so there's a compromise there. But I didn't have trouble with that.
Can you make a comment on what you mean by fairly fast?
I'm sorry, I can't because the speed indicator on my lathe is too low for me to bend over to see it. So I just use my own sense.
I have a question which relates to these off balance things. Is it safe to turn? You know, you go through, I guess, engineering would be called harmonics or whatever. Your lathe starts shaking at a certain speed, but if you keep increasing it, at some point it goes away, quote unquote. Is that safe to turn at that speed where it's out of that shake range, but by going higher?
I haven't had the guts to do that, to try
that. Okay, that's a good answer.
So I got a comment on the vibration thing. If you take a look at Barbara Dill's book on page 104, and I actually built one of these, it's a balancing aid for doing exactly what you're doing, and you're still holding between centers, but you have the ability to add a counterweight as you need it on this disc, and so you can put things off center. And that's I'm like you, I love Barbara Dill's explanation of all this technology. And as soon as I seen this page, I went out to my shop and built one. I bought the extension so I can put my drives in, and I followed exactly what she did, and it works perfectly. You can run it up to 2000 RPM, perfectly balanced. And as you take wood away, it goes out of balance, and it's really easy to rebalance it, and it's totally safe. Nothing flies apart. So Barbara Dill's book, page 104.
Yes, I have the book, and I will have to look at that. And I did discover that when you turn one side, you've got to change the speed on your lathe, because it's not the same when you change it. When I go from 1 to 2 to 2 to 3, I have to watch my speed because it has changed the balance.
And that's the beauty of Barbara Dill's example here, is that it gives you the ability to very easily and quickly rebalance, so that when you change your approach, you can just rebalance. So yeah, it's just safety's paramount, and that's a really, really good tool to keep it that way.
Thanks, Bert.
Anybody else?
With the creep of the tailstock, does the washer underneath your tailstock, is it a circle or is it square?
I don't know what you mean, washer, but it's square.
Okay. This is a commonly found problem with smaller lathes that have a circular clamp underneath the tailstock. The tailstock, if you keep cranking on it, the tailstock will back up.
Right. Mine's square. Yes.
Okay.
I understand what you're saying. And even mine will do that a bit. And especially if you get your lathe bed too oiled, it really will slip.
Okay.
Anybody else on this? All right. Bert, are you, David, thank you very much for those bowls. Those were very intriguing.
Thank you.
I'd like to see a good slideshow on making those. I'm sure it's out there on YouTube, but I'd still like to see one. Yeah. Bert, what's that you got there you're trying to show us?
That's a fisherman's urn. It's got my signature wooden plug in the bottom, so it's a threaded wooden plug. And I had this sphere, it was almost a sphere, segmented, and I screwed up when I glued it together, so it isn't a perfect sphere, and I didn't have the heart to throw it away. So I thought, well, I'll make a fisherman's float and call that a fisherman themed urn.
Where did you get the picture of the fish? Is that a laser engraving?
That's a laser engraving. I just took a couple of screenshots of some line art and stuff off the internet. One was the, well, this one doesn't have it. I have another one with trees around it, so I can put it like the fish is in a lake. And it's just line art, free line art on the internet. And I screenshot it and then put it in my laser pecker and and laser it onto the wood. That's all I got.
Okay, comments for Bert?
When you bury those, you should have a string that comes up out the top so that it's, you know that there's a bopper under the ground. So
I could just add a little bit of a leader to this, eh?
yeah, yeah,
Good
yeah, with a little
idea.
weight, maybe a lead weight on the surface. But then you'd really be worried if suddenly it'd start moving and shaking.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
John Wilson, you had your wing up there. You were going to show us something today.
Morning. I had some follow-up comments. I don't know if this computer is going to work right. It's been problematic with the new download. So yes, I do have something to share. One of it, are you seeing any of this? Is a handle.
Yeah, now we got it.
Yep.
Now make that full screen.
Is that
That's what
better?
Jerry's trying to do as well. Yeah,
There you go.
there you go.
The takeaway is that this ash handle was put together, I don't know, a week ago, whatever. I broke the skew handle. The takeaway is you're talking about scrapers, buying and using. This is the photo that I'd wanted to show. They're not that hard. It's a 1/2-inch drill hole, drill the center, and then find a 1/2-inch dowel and cut the dowel in half to plug it, use the epoxy. It's super easy. So that's the takeaway with the scrapers. And then I had a piece.
Hold on a sec. That's a very good method of doing that. I've seen that before, and that is a really good method. I forgot.
Right, and it's tapered. I want to be clear. It looks real nice and all, but that half round component, that dowel that's been cut in half and planed down to fit, is tapered. There's a wedge component to it, and the epoxy takes up the space. So you're good to go. All of that is wedging off and bracing off of that ferrule. Whether the ferrule is copper or brass, fair enough. It's an inexpensive way to replace the handle.
Yeah.
It's literally super user-friendly and very, very easy to do. Well, I think it's easy to do. Maybe it's not, but it's an easier option than trying to get the other components to fit. So just a suggestion. The other one-liner I had was a piece of bird's eye maple that had come out of a platter, and I just wanted to share it with you folks.
Can you make that full screen?
I can.
Please?
Yep. I have some other photos with it.
There you go.
Came out great. It was a glue up from a old friend that was a guitar maker, and this was used for the handle, and then I glued it up because I didn't want it to go to waste, and it was too beautiful. I know some people are not a fan of glue ups, but I think it came out fantastic.
I didn't see the glue lines until you pointed them out.
See better now, but it's still.
And maybe this is the better one there. Apologies.
That's good. That's good. Yeah.
But anyway, just a gorgeous piece of bird's eye. So that's all I have.
So talk to that for a second now. What are you cutting that with? How are you getting to a good finish? What do you do about tear out and the wood peckiness of bird's eye?
Bird's eye, right? Agreed. Bird's eye is problematic. Get it to where it's not wobbling. Get it so it's round, and then increase the speed, and then sharp tools. There's no secret to that. Sharp tools. The takeaway is that when you get to bird's eye or some of the other, I think I had put up an Australian burl prior. I'm convinced that you've almost increased your sanding time by 1/3, because as much as you can have sharp tools with bird's eye and some of the other flaky or weird components like this, the only way to get that smooth or a glass finish is to get into the sanding or increase the sanding. Just my opinion, but that's just my opinion. The glue up was with Tide Bond 3, and then under compression for a full day, 24 hours, out of compression, and let it set for another 2 days before I put it on the lathe. So that glue needs time to set up. Maybe I'm incorrect, or maybe that's old, but it's always worked well for me. So I didn't have any problems with the glue up.
What finish?
That's been my experience with those glues as well. You think they're dry in an hour or two, and you leave them overnight, but in the middle there, they're not dry yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, let's see if this will play to Jim's point. There's a finish. There's the Osmo. So to your other question that I didn't answer, it's the Osmo top oil that I've utilized on this, and 3 coats, good to go. And I have a follow-up question to this with 5 minutes left. A lot of the pieces I sign on the bottom, I'll put the species of the wood and sign my name. I am resistant to change, as I think we all are to some extent. And I'm still using a Dremel tool with a round tip and signing my name. A lot has come across with the lasers and the pyrography. I'm not saying it correctly. What are other people using to sign their pieces, I guess is the question.
I use a pyro pen.
I use a brand that I heat.
You use a brand? Okay.
And then I burn it in. And that's always a challenge because woods respond differently, even though it's the same temperature brand. I have a lot of trouble with that.
Right.
I use a Laser Pecker Pro with my, and I always laser it after the finish is completely cured.
Sure.
I used to do it before, and it burns the wood. It doesn't give you the real nice crisp signature on plain wood when you laser it. But if you do it after the finish is fully cured, you get a really nice crisp burn. At least that's my experience.
So let's go back to that Osmo for a second there. You're wiping that on and then leaving no visible trace on the surface, right? Just wiping it down. Is that what you're doing?
So the Osmo went on that video. I had 4 or 5 bowls that I was finishing with Osmo at the time. After I got done putting the first coat of Osmo on all of those bowls, I immediately went to wipe off. And then there was wiping it so there's no excess. I don't want to say dry, but wiping so no excess.
And you do that 3 times.
So it'll set for 6 to 10 hours, and literally 12 hours later, I can do another coat. So in a day and a half, I can get 3 coats on.
Do you buff it after the 3rd coat?
It's a hand buff. I have not tried or utilized a wax buff on the Osmo because there's a wax component in the Osmo. And I don't, that's the other one. That's the other greater, if I take a step back and go to the greater question, the goal with it is to mimic an oil finish that's a matte, but provide the protective component that I'd get out of the water locks. So the water locks are super shiny. The Osmo is a matte finish, and I don't want it super shiny. I want it matte. That's the point, is the matte. And that's the reason that I'm hesitant with the follow-up wax buff.
Well, what kind of a buff are you doing? What do you mean a hand buff?
A hand buff. It's a microfiber towel, and I'll spend 2 or 3 minutes just rubbing down the entire component. And that's enough shine to bring up the highlights, dull down the excess spots, and that's it. That's literally it. It finishes to a good non-blemish, right? Every wood component has a piece that you see something and, oh, it's not right. I need to go back to the lathe. Stop. Just continue to buff. And the blemish that's there, count it as part of the wood. You can't get everything in the world, but when it comes to that bird's eye, there's no shortages of blemishes. So
yeah.
I just got fine woodworking today, and the article that popped my attention relates to this. It said it's an article about food safe finishes. You flip it open and the title says, "The best food safe finish is no finish at all in wood." And this is written, you must have read it. This is written by a guy who's a professor of wood anatomy. And he has a great explanation about how if you leave it open, the water takes the bacteria down into the wood and then evaporates off and kills the bacteria off. And he claims it's the best finish. And I go, oh my gosh, all my finish in my closet could go away.
Right. It's sort of a you can't win sort of scenario. The other one liner that nobody talks about is sunlight. The UVA and B light. People don't talk about it, but it does kill bacteria. And we don't put wood products out in sunlight after we've cleaned it, because what does it do? It dries it. If you left it in the shade, to your point and what the article references, the inner workings of the wood and the Cambria and there's 5 components. The inner layers take in that bacteria and minimize or negate the bacteria growth to get to somewhere where it would be harmful. The finish industry, the one liner I have with the finish industry is once it stops smelling, it's set and you should be good. So once you can stop smelling the finish or the additives, they've cured, and then depending on the product, you should be good. I'm not taking my bare tongue and licking the finished product or immersing it in water, but it should be good. So,
but you have to come to that not from just having done a bunch of finishing. You have to come to that with a fresh nose.
Well, yes, you need to be out of the shop, out of the finish area, out of the whatever, and come in and say, okay, it feels good to the touch. It's dry. It's been there for a couple days. Put it to your nose. Do I smell something? Okay, it's not fully cured. Let it set another day or two. And sometimes that day or two is literally 15 to 20 days. So
he went as far as saying that you could put raw meat, vegetables on the same cutting board if you wash it and let it dry on both sides between them. Boy, I never heard that. That's spun me around.
That's Dr. Sandy Robinson, and she did the Fine Woodworking podcast. She was on it, the most recent one, and it's really worth listening to.
Back to your comment on using Osmo, if you're just using Osmo Top Oil, one of the things I found is that you on your last coat, instead of using top oil, get some of the Osmo cleaner. They call it an Osmo cleaner, but basically it's just a little heavier on the wax component, and it doesn't take very much, and it gives you that little bit extra satin shine. It isn't really a shine, but it has less of the oil component and more of the wax component, and they sell it as a cleaner. So if you're ever redoing something that's 10 years old and you need to refinish it with Osmo, you don't have to put top oil, just put this cleaner on, and it works beautiful.
Yeah, you mentioned that before, Bert, and I actually purchased a bottle based on your prior statement and have a bottle in the house. I have not utilized it more than 5 or 6 times, but the initial read, it's phenomenal, and it does give a little bit more gloss. It's not a gloss, it's still matte, but it's a subtle shine. How about that?
I assume you're not Beal buffing any of these finishes, right?
Oh, one more time, Jim. I'm sorry, sir.
I assume you're not Beal buffing or using a Beal buffing system after you do these kinds of finishes.
So I have the Beal system. I do utilize the Beal system for anything that utilizes the water locks, because that gets off any of the surface debris or buildup on features. I do not use the Beal system on anything with the Osmo.
I'm thinking that what I need for the Osmo, what the Osmo would like, is a dry mop, the same mop that you'd use on the Beal system for wax, floppy mop, but dry, no wax, nothing on it, just a whisk, because it does get little wee lumpies that need to go away. I think that's what I'm getting with the hand buff.
I think Don said that's the way he sets up his, with a clean mop at the end.
I think that's sounding right to me.
I hear everybody's questions. My biggest problem with these finishes is after you've washed them 3 or 4 times from food, putting food on them, they start to dull. And the second question is, isn't it important to make sure the bacteria from the food which is gonna kill you faster than anything else? I realize you have to be careful about what it picks up and cures, but my goodness,
Yeah,
it sometimes feels we're being legalistic about this as opposed to practical.
Right. The closing statement I'll make, and I think someone had asked what sort of, actually somebody did ask. The final buff is done with the microfiber cloth, but all the applications I'm using are a paper-based blue shop towel. And the absorption and cleanup of whatever finish I'm using, whether it be Waterlocks or the Osmo or the Danish oil, the application seems to be different and absorbs at a different rate based on a cloth component versus a paper component when you're doing that. The final finish, the third finish, I utilize a paper. It needs to be, I think that it needs to be paper because the wipe down absorbs more material, more substrate.
Paper is slightly abrasive.
I'm sorry?
Paper is slightly abrasive.
The cloth doesn't seem to have a similar absorption rate, and maybe it's the abrasive component, but I find better results with a paper-based substrate on that final wipe down. So the buffing, that's a different angle. Everything's dried and supposedly set. The buffing with the microfiber, but the final, I find paper works better.
See y'all next week, and we'll have you up first, Don, because you got your hand up now.
Okay,
Okay. Thank you all.
cheers.
Wood shop. Thank God for wood.